construction is only just above agriculture and hunting in terms of digitalisation, which is one that always shocks me.
We've all been there, haven't we? And it always feels like we're on the receiving end of it. Talking about late payments, probably because most of us are decent humans. Oh, I don't know. Late payments for something or another, and depending on your financial situation, that can be a brief oversight or a disastrous situation to be in. But should this be a situation we ever find ourselves in at all? Yeah, if you're in financial difficulty, then there is a valid reason for late payments. But there is also no shortage of technologies that can help you out here, that can manage finances, provide warnings, easily resolve late payment issues, both in our daily lives and commercially. With this in mind, it can be highly frustrating to work in an industry that relies on collaborative efforts to construct and build. Yet when it comes to purchase orders, invoicing, and of course payments, there seems to be a disparity. I've been lucky enough to work on a recent research project alongside the FIS, AMA Research, and the University of Reading. Procurement in the finishes, fit outs, and interior sector, which highlighted these particular payment problems. Indeed, 2 out of 3 formally tendered work packages were asked to reduce the pricing retrospectively. And half of these respondents admitted that retention monies are rarely released on time. In short, we all know that payments are an issue within construction. And this just isn't a UK-wide issue. This occurs in other countries as well. But what can we do about it? Is tighter legislation the answer? More openness and transparency? Or does tech have the answer? Our guest today is Fiona Graham, a Senior Business Development Manager for PAYAPPS, cloud construction software for submitting, assessing, and approving progress payments for main and subcontractors. PAYAPPS have recently released Building Reliance through technology reports for both the UK and Australia, New Zealand, which highlights the issues we may have when integrating technology into our payment systems. And it seems one thing that may be contributing to these issues is the perception of digital adoption. 2 quotes that stood out to me from both reports were, "We're a small company and just don't always have the time to research or find out about these things." And the other one was, "We are slower to purchase new technologies that would benefit the company. And some employers or employees find it hard to adapt to using new technologies," which is kind of worrying. But back to Fiona, who has worked within construction for over 20 years now, from British Gas to Causeway Technologies and now PAYAPPS. So that was a long intro, but Fiona, welcome.
Thank you. Morning.
Have I missed anything off that long intro there?
No, I don't think so. Obviously, it's a very niche product, and it's but it comes with a lot of different problems along the way. And what you're saying about adoption, yes, there is always that perception that oh, should we do it? There's fear of change and things like that. But certainly with our product, it's very much plug and play, so we can get them up and running in 3 weeks. So yeah, you were pretty spot on, Peter. Thank you.
Brilliant, fantastic. Right, let's rewind a little bit. In doing research for this this podcast, one thing that stuck out to me, a stat, was that it was 30% of all construction businesses spend more than 7 hours a week chasing late payments. Now, even if that was just 10%, that's still 1 in 10 businesses are spending more than 7 hours chasing money. So how have we got to this stage where payment practices are so poor in our industry?
Oh, I think, the businesses, all businesses are coping with a lot of industry challenges just now. So we've obviously got inflation, we've got shortage of materials, shortage of labour, and then you've had a pandemic which has been thrown into the mix as well. And I think that really is driving the profit margins on construction projects, certainly in the UK, are super tight. I was looking at the other day, and there was a study from 2021 from Turner and Townsend, and UK construction sector is the lowest margin in the world. So it's 3.9 average.
Wow.
margin there, and that's compared to North America, which is 4.6, and in the continent is 6.1. And then if you actually drill into even further, you've got Construction News that are saying that the top 100 average is 2.6, top 10 a loss of 0.1. So I think it just affects all of the tiers, right from your top tier right the way down. So it's that tight squeeze on it, and I think that's really why we've got to where we are, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and it compounds right through the supply chain, doesn't it? And I think
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
that's what one of the issues. Do you think what we've been through for the past 3 to 4 years has sped things up in terms of highlighting poor payments, or has it just been a continuation from prior to the pandemic and all of the things going on in the world?
I I think obviously there's a huge focus on it at the moment. There's lots of stuff going on. You've got the prompt payment code and stuff. There is a focus, and I think obviously the pandemic just kind of compounded everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, and just where we are is something that needs to be addressed most definitely.
Okay, cool. So I noticed in some I think it was a blog post that PayApps did, and it was quoting Bax Payment Services and some research they'd done, and it said that 75% of UK businesses uh, are forced to wait a month, so 30 days
Mm.
and maybe a bit more beyond the
30 days
agreed.
is quite good. 30 days is good.
Well, that's beyond the agreed contract terms. So if and I've been privy to this in that some of those can be 60 days, and I've even seen 90 days. What implications are there to late and poor payment practices?
But obviously, they can be catastrophic, so it can seriously impact your client's contractual ability to be able to deliver both on time, specification, and within budget. And that's why we're seeing, I think there was one I read earlier that 44% of projects end up in a loss. So that's really quite shocking as well. And obviously, in extreme cases, it can lead to insolvency of
Mm, okay.
companies. And obviously, you've got your business relationships, they start to break down if they're not getting paid, and your supply chain is key to running your business.
Mm.
That can impact your reputation and then your ability to win work off the back of that. So it starts to get into this big snowball effect that, goodness knows where we could end up with it.
So if 40 odd percent is actually running at a loss, Uh, do you feel the 60 or 50 X percent, you'd almost have to try and increase that profitability of those to make up for that loss, and that in itself is worrying and an issue because nobody can sustain that in terms of adding money on to recoup lost money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. I think there's a lot being done to tackle it at the moment. As I say, we've got the prompt payment code, which is obviously dependent on the size of the company. They are judged on whether they pay them
Mm,
within 30 days. And there were some encouraging figures came out last week from Build UK. So I think the latest
okay.
figures were saying that invoices paid within 60 days had reached 95% from 82. And then we had average time to pay invoices from 30 days was now at 30 days from 45. I think the other thing to mention here is that the focus is very much on the volume, so when you're getting paid, but not on the
Okay.
actual value. So you might be getting paid on time, but you're possibly not getting paid for all of the work that you've done. So I think that's where the metrics kind of get a wee bit skewed
Mm,
as to the assessment. And also the thing that the clock on the payment time doesn't start, only starts when the application has actually been certified. So you've got this block in between, which is hiding behind the figures that everybody's going whoop whoop.
yeah, yeah.
So the block behind, which is obviously where PAYAPPS comes in, because that's what we do. We do the verification of the actual applications or claims if you're working in Ireland.
For sure, and I feel that we'll move on to technology in a little bit, because I think that's fundamental to trying to sort this all out. But when you start to look at data, as you rightly pointed out, it is so easy for figures to be skewed, to look positive, to look negative, to look neutral, dependent on how you see those figures and view them as well,
Yeah.
which in itself causes issues for reporting and analysis, and not just that, but almost doom mongering and scaremongering
Yeah,
in the fact
yeah.
that people aren't getting paid as regularly as they should be, and that almost sets a bar or a precedent, really, which other people could potentially be drawn into. I think there's an importance on guidelines or legislations or even just facts and figures and stats. And there was one quote from Planning, Building, Construction Today that I read. I really don't think this goes far enough, but I want to get your take on it. And they said in order for it to work well, which they're talking about payment practices and things like that, there must be a clear agreement and records as to who is to be paid for what and when. That's fine, great. Anyone can produce clear guidance and records and things like that, but how how much would that help? Do we need to legislation and laws and, I suppose, to escalate it, fines and penalties? Would that actually help, or is that just going to add to the mix of confusion and not really help at all?
Yeah, I think it gosh, it probably will add to the confusion. Say we have got the dates just now, but they're all hiding behind, different caveats there that the clock doesn't start ticking till it's actually verified. So I think there is obviously with the Construction Act in there, you have a certain amount of time to get when you should have your application
Mm,
in, when it should be verified, and then when it should be paid. So we do have that legislation in there. In Ireland, obviously, have the Contracts Act, which is not quite as strict as in the UK. So it's your
okay.
5 days and then you're 21. So we do have legislation in there. It's just how do you actually monitor it? But obviously in the UK, there is always a risk of a smash and grab if you do miss a date, which from our point of view is actually, companies are looking to be able to streamline that and to manage that and manage that compliance by using our software. So that's good.
Okay.
But obviously in Ireland, it's slightly different. It's not quite as big a risk, and they are very much done on a handshake in Ireland. So it's slightly different from the UK to Ireland. But we do have that legislation in there. We do have the Construction and the Contracts Act already in place. So I think
Okay.
we're getting there. We just need to manage the process better. And obviously you can't do that when you're doing it on spreadsheets. So
Yeah.
if you're using software, then you can see clearly when the date was done, whether you missed it or whether you didn't miss it. Whereas if it's a kind of blurry line when you're in spreadsheets or getting lost in QS's inboxes or getting bounced back, which is where we're at. I mean, even some of the biggest, tier ones are still relying on spreadsheets and emails. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite scary. I always go back to the report from McKinsey, which actually says that construction is only just above agriculture and hunting in terms of digitalization, which is one that always shocks me.
That my son watches tractors and things like that on telly and stuff like that, and their tech's pretty advanced, to be fair. So,
Yeah, well, we
um,
might be end up getting to the bottom of that table soon if we don't get moving.
yeah, absolutely. Going back to one thing you said there, and I know there is a difference between how they work in Ireland, how they work in the UK. Are there any other differences in those two countries and the way payments work, or the way the industry works in general from a payment perspective?
Um, I would say very much in Ireland, it's very much done in a handshake. So,
Mm,
if a subcontractor did try and do a smash and grab, I doubt much longer they'd be working in Ireland. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest difference, to be honest. And there
yeah.
is only just the two dates here. It's slightly more complicated once you get into the Construction Act within UK.
Mm. And that's really interesting that you say that, because we've just spoken about legislation and how that could potentially help or hinder things, and then you speaking about Ireland, which is done on a handshake, so to speak. And the one that kind of stuck out there is that in Ireland it's less contractual from that perspective, like we're saying, but if you missed a deadline or a date or a payment, then your reputation would be more tarnished. Whereas if it goes by the rules and regs of the UK, your reputation might not be that tarnished because it's under a ruling, which is a bit
Yeah,
strange, really. You'd think it'd be the other way
yeah.
around.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. I think if you're working in London, obviously there's lots of work. So yeah,
Yeah.
you can jump about.
So let's move on to the tech now, which is obviously your bag, and how you help the construction industry. The going back to the building resilience through technology report from PAYAPPS, the one you did for the UK, there was a statement in there that said over half of the businesses that are digitally ahead stated that technology has helped their business achieve better financial management. So that's like pretty much a no-brainer, really, isn't it? One thing that was really interesting, though, was that technology set also helped them, or 60% of the business said that technology helped them retain or attract talent, which is an interesting stat in itself. I think we'll come on to that talent bit in a second, but the one thing that I'd like to know from technology perspective is how is it helping resolve the payment issues?
The payment issues. Well, historically, obviously, payment process and very much still, there's a lot of spreadsheets out there. So it's coming
Yeah.
in inconsistent formats. They're getting lost in inboxes. So you can lead to miscalculations, which can end up in disputes or, not paying people enough or paying them too much, which we've had in some occasions. The actual time spent just reconciling all these different formats. So if you're getting something in from a subcontractor, you're having to reconcile it back to your format. And then the risk of missing dates. So especially keeping you compliant to the Construction Act, if you're having to remind yourself in Outlook, whereas our system actually reminds you to do that. And then it just streamlines the whole process. It's in one platform, one common set of data. You don't have to do all of that reconciling. You don't have to chase payment because you can see exactly where it is. And from a cash flow point of view, as soon as that subcontractor submits their application, you can see what liabilities you have for that month, rather than them sitting in. If you've got 4 or 5 QSs, they're sitting in their inboxes, you only get sight of what's due to go out of your business once you've verified it. So it's having that insight and that visibility across all of your projects in one place and in real time. So in terms of cash flow, which we know with tight margins, you really need to know what's due to go out your business, then that can help you there. And obviously not getting bogged down in admin, that you can actually be doing something which is value add to the business rather than having to check whether Fiona's messed a cell up that's absolutely knocked your whole spreadsheet to pot. So hopefully it makes it simpler for both the subcontractor and the main contractor, simpler, fairer and faster, which is obviously one of our taglines. So
The interesting thing is that if you look at it from your own life and your own bank account and your own financials and your own money, unless you're not very good at that kind of thing, if you try to do that via a spreadsheet and not some kind of banking app or online, and I suppose I'm talking to an older generation with more financial commitments, then you're going to really struggle to do it if you're trying to do that just on a spreadsheet or pen and paper. But we still do that in construction and in business, like you've
it's
just said, which
crazy.
it just doesn't make sense.
It's absolutely crazy. And, one of the things we always get from main contractors, what about our subcontractor adoption? To be honest, using the tech makes it easier because they might not be very good at Excel. They might not be very good and just mess up a cell, a formula, and that's the whole thing, prone to errors. So I think, you're 100% right. I mean, who would manage their own finances on a spreadsheet?
And adding on to that, if they're not very good at tech, then which is going to be easier to use, a spreadsheet or an app which does most of it for you? But I understand the fact that people will probably hear the word app and think, oh, that sounds new technology. I can't use that. I'll just stick to a spreadsheet because that looks simpler.
Exactly. I think that's it. I think it's just the fear of change. And even if you think of the subcontractors, they're getting asked to submit their applications in different formats. So they're having to chop and change. Whereas if they use a system such as PAYAPPS, it's all in one format. It's all there for them. All they need to do is basically go down and click, I've completed 50% of that, or I want £5,000 of that. And here's my supporting evidence. I'll just add a picture. and press and go. So compared to having to wade your way through a spreadsheet and the fear of actually, as I say, errors getting creeping in on the actual formula within those spreadsheets.
And it's all those added extras and all those little things that are pretty simple and easy to pick up, like you said, like a photo of an invoice or showing the work's been done, or whatever it might be, from a technology perspective, to make it and keep it simple, to add that authenticity, to add that structure, security, loads of different things that can be hugely important, and make life a lot easier. Can be done through PAYAPPS, and other apps are available. I think
Yes,
we need to say that.
Yeah, similar solutions.
Similar solutions, yes. So one final question then, really. We've spoken a little bit about the industry and a fair bit about individual organisations and their issues with spreadsheets and technical adoption and things like that. But I'd quite like to understand it more on an industry-wide perspective. I understand, or I think everybody does right now, that current practices in this industry are surprisingly manual. I think we
Yeah.
can all agree on that. Why, or what are the barriers to industry-wide change? Why are we struggling so much with this?
I think it is, as I said earlier, I think it is the fear of change, and I think
Okay.
they've got they're very busy doing stuff. So you've got all the new tech on site, but sometimes you maybe forget about the back office,
Mhm.
because we've always done it that way. It's just worked.
Okay.
As we've always done it that way, and I think also if you look at implementation of an ERP solution, that can be really quite painful. Everybody who's gone through an ERP implementation would be like, "Oh gosh, I don't want to do that again."
Yeah.
So I think there is that fear, like, "Oh, do I really want to go through this?" There is that fear of change, and like, is this going to be really hard? But solutions such as ourselves are very much software as a service, plug and play. We always say we can have a company up and running in 3 weeks, and that's both on
Mhm.
your subcontractor side and your side, because it is, you just log in and do it, and we can actually do it quicker than that. So I think there is that fear, and there's also, I've been through that pain previously, that do I really want to change things just now because it is working? I just need to get my jobs done and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think there also is, everybody knows there is a need to be able to digitize the data. So the data from when you've got a design through to when you're estimating it, through to when what's actually costing you on site, to be able to manage your cash flow, to be able to get those margins up. There is a real, I think everybody recognizes that they need to be able to understand that better, because otherwise
Mm.
you're going to be pricing it the same all the time, because that's what your estimators are doing, because you don't actually realize it's losing money at the other end. So I think there is an acknowledgement within the industry that they do need to get a handle on that data from start to finish of a
Mhm.
project, right through to maintenance. But there is that fear factor in the middle that goes, "Oh, do I really want to do this?" But hopefully we're chipping away at it, and yeah.
For sure, and your website is full of valuable information, and you're always pulling out reports and stuff like that, which is fantastic to see, because it's a really good value add, and hopefully it reduces that fear. So I'd advise anyone to have a look at your website and check out some of that information, because it makes perfect sense, why people should that digital adoption, particularly from a payment perspective,
Yeah,
if nothing else, and it's so counterintuitive, not to think of it from a long-term perspective, because if you get it sorted out now, life becomes a lot easier and you can focus on your day job and everything else you're doing. Whereas if you're having to manually input things and make sure calculations are adding up, there will be errors and you will miss stuff.
yeah,
And from
exactly.
an industry-wide perspective, that will just spread,
Yeah,
right across the supply chain, and errors become major errors, which
exactly.
is a
It's just
worry.
that big snowball. Exactly. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about attracting the right skills, because young people don't want to be sitting working at a spreadsheet. They want to have the up-to-date tech. They want it. So I think there is always, there is that labour skills shortage within the industry as it is. So to attract the
Yeah.
right people, I think they need to be investing in the right software, because they want to be doing stuff that really, makes money rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
spending hours every month, every day messing about with spreadsheets.
And we've got to remember that to attract this talent, the new talent that's coming through might be in other industries, just finding their feet in the world of work. They are all digital natives, and that's all they've ever known.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
they're much more likely to know and understand how apps and software work than they are a spreadsheet. That in itself is a reason to look to get these things sorted quicker than normal. Not just for your own organization either, but for the good of the industry.
Uh-huh,
That's just a trickle down effect as much as it is the late payments and the issues that cause from a positive
definitely.
perspective. Let's end on a positive. The trickle down effect of people starting to use technology and then other people catching on to it. It'll
Yeah,
just grow and grow, and hopefully, um, eventually, you'll have a full supply chain which is totally digital and more efficient and effective. Fiona, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to
no,
talk to
thank
us
you.
about pay apps and the issues we've got in the industry, but also adding a bit of positivity in there in terms of how if we can look to digitalize and utilize technology from a financial perspective, the advantages that will give any organization that goes through that short term pain for
Yeah,
long term
yeah,
gain.
yeah, exactly that. It is easy. Yeah, it's most definitely simple.
Okay, thanks once again. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thanks, Peter.